We had a wonderful day. We had a wonderful discussions, and you're going to have the dessert now. And I'm very glad that the president of Rwanda, our host, accepted to have a conversation on the stage, and so I'm a little bit nervous. You know, I cannot keep my mouth shut. I'm not sure I'll be allowed to leave the country or not. But he's a friend of mine, so I think I'm fine. Can you please welcome His Excellency Paul Kagame?
He will be very fine.
Right. I mean, we're going to have, as usual, a very frank and open discussion, and there's no taboos, and we will have also room to take questions at the end. And I'm very grateful, actually, because President Kagame made the point. He said we must let people also ask questions. So we're going to take questions from people. But we're going to take questions from non-Rwandans, because Rwandan people have the chance to question the president every now and then. But our guests don't have this chance. Is that fair?
Very fair.
It's okay. So please, non-Rwandans only will be allowed to ask questions. And let me start by really expressing our gratitude and thanks. People enjoyed very much coming to this country. And we always have a problem when we have one of those meetings, because we have a strange mix of people. We have some very senior people, and we have some ordinary people. And trying to get visa for everybody to come to our event is always a nightmare. We did not have a single problem with any person trying to come to this country. Really. And the process of getting the visas to people was so efficient. I don't know if Sega is here in the room or not. Is Sega here? Sega Gebres is not here. She lost her chance to be famous. Okay. Because she told me of amazing experience she had, and how efficient is the government in dealing with the issues of visas. So really thank you for that. You managed to develop something in this country which some people will say is not African. But I don't agree with that. I don't think Africans are not that bad, but we don't have good leaders. That's the problem. Is that a reasonable assessment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Africa is not bad at all. Africa is as good as any other continent. Absolutely.
But when I was coming this morning here, I noticed there was no cars in the street. And I asked, what's happening today? And people said, oh, today is a day we clean the streets. Yes. And citizens come out and clean the streets. Yes. This is amazing in really interaction between citizens and the state when people feel ownership of their own streets. How many people are aware of this fact? Can you raise your hand? You are aware of this fact? I was the only ignorant guy then. Because I didn't know why there's no cars. Anyway, but that was right. Mr. President, I think this is going to be a difficult conversation because we have limited time, and you straddle a number of areas. Not only you are the president of this country, but you are chair of the African Union, you are an international figure, you are involved in so many things around us. So we'll try to visit these different areas. We start with the African Union. Now, we also chair the reform in the African Union. What exactly are going to reform, Mr. President? What you hope to change?
Well, to begin with, we have to change the mentality as to how we do things on our continent. Whether it's about efficiency, it's about pride in ourselves that will drive us to do things, but also institutional reforms. Which institutions have been put in place or need to be put in place, and for what purpose, and how they operate. We had to examine this to determine which reforms would be appropriate for the institutions. The other part has been to look at the financing of activities of the African Union. Financing is very critical in many ways. Two, I will talk about. One, you need resources. You need finance to do things. There's no question about it. That's one. The second is, what is the source of these funds that are going to help us do things we want? The source matters because if you're not the source to generate these funds that support you to do what you want to do, and it is somebody's financing, well, there are a couple of problems associated with that. You'll be trying to do what is good for you, for yourself, but you also have to pay back. You have to do something else for the other that may not be healthy.
If you decode this, Mr. President, I know you are a diplomat as well. European Union at the moment fund the bulk of the operational budget of the African Union.
Yes.
That's correct? And what we're saying here is what sovereignty you have if somebody else is funding your operational budget, and why can't you fund your own budget? Is that correct statement?
First of all, it is not proper that we don't fund our own budget because we can. That's number one. So if you can, why don't you do it?
Why not do it?
That's the first question. And if you want somebody to fund your budget, then you will be doing somebody else's bidding, not really doing what you wanted to do for yourself. It's clear.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Like if Chinese build the African Union building and then tap the data, we say that's fair. I mean, it's your building. That's a big deal.
It's a very fair assertion.
Yeah, I mean,
it is with the Chinese, it is with the Europeans, it is with Americans, it is with everybody.
It's open house.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's okay. I mean, we have a frank discussion and
that's why we are friends.
Yes. Okay. Right. And so you, as I understand that the proposal coming out that on certain imports, not all imports, certain imports, each country will levy 0.02%. That is not 1%, not 0.1%, 0.021% tax, and this money will be allocated to fund the African Union. And you got 40 countries accepting this?
So far we have close to 25 or about 25 countries applying it already.
Applying it already?
Yes. And there are others yet to find their way to doing that. But what is important with that, if I may say quickly, is 0.2% of eligible imports was actually calculated. It was arrived at through a process where some of the people, the Africans,
Donald Kabruka did
Donald
that?
Kabruka is here. He led that team and has been working on it. So it was calculated to find, and they found that it was possible for countries to actually do that and be able to fund the activities. Yeah. Secondly, it has automaticity in the process. It comes, you don't have to wait for people to choose whether they do it or not. So it is predictable, and that is very important. Even where people had doubts, because either they did not understand it properly or they had other considerations, we have had the team again go to countries to explain how this works. If they are worried that they are going to pay more than they were supposed to pay according to them, or what they were paying before, then a conversation happens where people are made comfortable that this is something affordable for them, and also that actually works very well for all of us.
Is there any country against this?
Well, many times not openly.
Okay.
Yes, but if you're not doing it.
Are you free to share with us which countries are causing problems?
Well, or you get 54 minus 25, then...
Right. No, because I think it's possible also for us to have conversations with the guys who doesn't want to participate. You say, why aren't you participating? I mean, I think it's time also for citizens to know what the leaders do, but we leave that to your discretion. Okay, so that's one thing. You also held a big you have been very busy as African Union chair. You had a meeting here also about free trade.
Yes.
That's completely free trade between Africa, or selected items, or how far are you going to go on free trade?
It was intended to have a completely free trade area.
Everything.
Yes, across our continent. And in fact, it is part of the reform process. As I said, reforming our mentality and activities and so on. For countries of the continent to increase intra-African trade and to be able to create a free trade area comes out of realization of the need, but also shifting from a position where that has not been happening, and in fact, at our own huge loss, because we could have gained more by going that way. So the fact that countries responded positively and saw it as very important is a key movement forward. I think it is a big achievement. And countries, this time 44 countries in the summit we had here a month ago, actually signed up. Some have already ratified and are in the process of ratifying. And by July, when we go to Mauritania for the African Union Summit, we hope the number will have even gone higher, or the 44, or nearly the 44 countries will have ratified. So which shows the speed at which 44 have already signed on that day.
To be frank, I mean, we have the habit sometimes we sign to things, but we never do it. You know, Maputo Declaration on Agriculture, when some 15 years ago, our African leaders signed to allocate 7% of their budget to agriculture, and I think only less than 10 countries done it. So are you optimistic that those guys who signed are going to respect their signature and execute?
I'm very optimistic. Signing is the first step that is necessary.
Course, yeah.
So we have that.
Okay.
The next is implementation.
Right.
And we already have a good number that are showing the way, and they are eager to do that. In fact, countries already, as I said, are ratifying. Right. And that shows they are keen on implementation.
Would it be useful for the African Union to consider to have more transparency in just letting us as citizens know who's doing what to whom, who is signing, who is not signing, who is paying, who is not paying, just to understand what our governments are doing. Traditionally, African Union is an executive club, and presidents are protective of each other. And is that
In principle, that is acceptable, and we should, and very reasonable, and in fact, to an extent, it is happening. All we need to do is be more efficient about it, more open about it, so we can work together to make sure that
citizens have the right to get also participation in this.
The signing happened on camera. We had the TVs and television and radios, and so.
Well, just they say the proof of the pudding is in eating it, or so we really need to see it. I mean, we have been great supporters of this foundation. We had complete sessions on economic integration of Africa, regional integration of Africa. We think is a must, is essential. We need it. Many of our countries are subscales. Many of our countries are landlocked. Many of countries, how can you breathe? How can you, we need to have that. Look at this. The best thing European did was the market.
It's very necessary, and I think Africans are realizing that.
To do that.
This is the way to go. We need to go faster. There's no question about it. We need to not wait for another year and another year. We need to do as much as we can and as soon as possible. And I think the African Union Commission is represented here. I think they hear you. We work with them to make sure that there is coordination and collaboration between different institutions of our society to make sure that each plays their part.
Their part in doing. Yes. Last year in our annual meeting, I had a conversation with Kofi Annan, and during the discussion, the subject of the International Criminal Court came up. I don't remember who brought it up, and fortunately, also Fatou Bensouda. She was in the audience. She's a prosecutor of the ICC. And there was a very interesting debate about ICC. Is it useful for Africa? Is it bad for Africa? Why are we rejecting it? Why we? And two things we took out of the discussion. The first thing, the ICC itself has a majority of judges who are Africans, actually. There's a lot of African judges there. I think they have 7 or 8 out of 19. The prosecutor is African. So it's really almost an African place. It's not like an imperialist or very white place, There are a lot of black people there.
Precisely, that is the point.
Yeah.
I think being African is not a question of the color of the skin. It's what is in your head.
Right. And Fatou Bensouda said most of the cases concerning Africa was referred to us by African governments, actually.
Sure.
So why people are complaining? And then the other argument was saying, oh, no, we don't need you because the African Union now has an African court. And African court now can deal with these issues. We don't need the ICC. What is happening? Is that true? You have an African court now which can replace the ICC?
Well, we have an African court which is ICC. Yes, ICC was supposed to cover the whole world.
Yes.
It ended up covering Africa.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying that. And there are many people across the world that should be tried by the court.
Yeah. This right recently to go to a number of other countries, actually.
Or in fact, some of those countries or leaders from Africa who are being tried by the ICC or whom the ICC intends to try, whatever they are trying them for has been committed in a partnership with those countries they don't try. That's the biggest thing. So from the beginning, I thought there was a flaw, not so much in the setup of ICC, but the basis on which it was being set up and how it was going to be used.
Right.
And by the way, right at the time of inception, I had a conversation with the people who were in it. We had a meeting in Sweden where conversation was taking place. And I told the people, even before it was set up, that I have concerns that when they are setting up this court, it's going to end up being a court to try Africans and not to try people from across the world, right from inception. And I don't think I have been proven wrong. So, but this has nothing to do with saying people who commit crimes should not be tried. No.
Okay.
When I'm arguing like that, people must be accountable for crimes anywhere.
No impunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But how is the process?
Right.
How is justice going to be dispensed?
Yeah.
This is the main question. Even with some discussions we have had, we tried even to improve what was already taking place by saying, why don't we actually create an African court?
Yeah.
And the cases may not end there, but the African court can help us identify which cases actually have merits for being tried. And maybe that could be the first stage before you pass it to the ICC.
I see.
Even that one is not without problems, because as we said earlier, you may still have an African court that is not really very African, as we have seen in many things. When we were joking about having an African Union building financed by this and that, and how different forces operate behind it. It's the same thing. If you have an African court, it doesn't mean it's not going to operate on behalf of others, especially when it comes to funding or other things I don't have to say here.
But Mr. President, I mean, one thing I was concerned about, because I was trying to read about what the African court, I understand, is meant really for political against humanity, genocide, or serious crimes. And, but I found it doesn't have the remit to try presidents or vice presidents or minister or something like that. So what is the function of that? I mean, who commit genocide other than presidents?
I agree with you. But the functioning of the courts can be improved, even starting from what you are saying.
Because
yes, but what is the point again of having a court which you so much highlight? I mean, not you, I mean, people talk about, that may end up actually only being selective about which cases they are going to try.
Right, yes.
Or a case, a court that is going to exonerate certain cases because those powers behind it are part of those crimes that are committed where people said they deserve to be tried.
Credibility is a major issue.
It is
whether
a huge
ICC, whether African court, and we need to find a way. But what we need is justice for victims.
We need that.
And we need to find to navigate how we're going to deliver.
Completely agree.
So thank you very much, Mr. President. Now, another big African issue which would like your input on is that issue of the Congo. This is a huge country in terms of population, resources, And yet it is a very miserable country. I mean, they cannot believe how poor the people, the atrocities committed, and then the failure of leadership in Congo. We have a president now whose term ended some time ago and refused to have an election. Where are we going to go from here? I mean, do we need intervention? What kind of intervention? Is it armed intervention? Is it diplomatic intervention? It is sanction? Is it what tools to handle this? Now you have probably one of the best views from here in Rwanda about what's happening in Congo. Personally, you know all the players, and actually some people will blame you. They think you got this guy in power, and frankly, probably, yeah. So
we'll talk about that.
yeah. So you have some moral responsibility here, Mr. President, and what is the way forward?
One, I was going to take issue with being asked the question about Congo, because I'm asked many times about Congo. But this time I won't take issue because I answered it as the chairman of the African Union.
Yes.
Otherwise, there
Not
hasn't...
as Rwanda, as African
No,
Union.
yes.
That's a great.
So
yes,
that's
so everybody knows here. This is the African Union position. Yeah.
So otherwise, I think it has been unfair many times for people to ask us about Congo as Rwanda or as the president of Rwanda, but so this helps me. One, for those who may blame Rwanda for what has happened in Congo over the years, well, I don't have any objection to people having their opinion, but Rwanda got involved with Congo for sure because of a reason. In fact, Congo came to Rwanda first before Rwanda went to Congo. When Mobutu, then the president of Zaire, intervened in our country in 1990 in support of Habyarimana, the president of the country. So it is Congo which came here first, before we went there, and because of our people who had gone there and who were still crossing the border, coming back. They had committed a genocide here, they crossed to Congo, they got support of Congo, then they were coming back intending to. So that's what really created the dynamic in which we got involved. And so I think the rest about Zaire and Mobutu is history, but we can now come to this particular problem. Even if you would say President Roland Kabila, who was there before the present one, who is his son, and so on, that we got involved with him in support of a situation that would help us deal with the problem that was originating from Congo at that time, as I have just explained. So that's how we got involved. But having said that, and many months or years that followed in which we got involved, it was over the same problem. But I think that ended long ago. So which means Congo was left there on its own, its people, its leaders, to sort out whatever problems they have. So you talked about Congo being poor, infrastructure lacking, this and that. Of course, one thing you did not mention is the worth of the country itself. The worth, for such a huge, wealthy country to have to be so poor is characteristic of a problem relating to Africa and how we need to really go about resolving many issues Africa or problems Africa faces. And then comes that problem which you talked about in terms of leadership. Leaders of Africa, whether they are, wherever they are, leaders shouldn't just be presidents or prime ministers, but these are very important leaders, even others at different levels. The fact that we cannot manage our wealth to deal with our poverty it's a defining issue. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, or Africa, as I know it, is concerned, we should be a better place than where we are today, given indeed the leaders we have, whether they are young or old, or men or women, and so on and so forth. And the history which some people referred to earlier, you know, we can now look, we have to look back in history to know how good Africa was or should have been. But with this time we have to change and then look into the future and say, no, but Africa needs to be like this in the future, learning our lessons we have learned and looking at the rest of the world the way it is. And we ask the question, why? Why should Africa not be like the many places developed as there? Yeah. So currently we have a Congo situation where there is supposed to be a transition, so to speak. It's not me who created it. I'm just talking about what is there.
As the African Union. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think there is elections coming up, or supposed to be coming up. The contestation is about whether that is going to happen, and when it is happening, there are disputes about is the current leadership staying, is it stepping aside, and there is a lot of friction going on within, and then within and from outside. It's a big problem that people are trying to look at and address. So from the African perspective, or African Union perspective, what is intended is to say, one, I think there have been efforts to bring the Congolese different groups together to agree how to move forward. I think they have secured some kind of agreement as to how they move forward. Now the problem has shifted to being, is this agreement going to be implemented? Because there are signs that, yes, people have reasons to be doubtful. So what the African Union wants is to pursue that route where the internal situation, their leaders continue to talk, and if they need support of neighbors or the international community has already been engaged through the UN, and which has presence there, by the way, it has been having a peacekeeping force there for close to a decade and a half. Yes, yes, close to 20,000. Well, if you asked me what they have done in 15 years, I'm not very sure.
Actually, we have the head of peacekeeping actually who's here. The guy who's managing those guys. I think where is...
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe they are doing...
Okay. Maybe you can explain what they are doing there.
Yes, maybe it will help us. But it's not their problem, it's our problem still. Yes, that people can come and live with us trying to address a problem, and we end up with more problems than we had before they came. That's, it's not their problem, it's ours.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a big problem. We don't know how it is going to be addressed, but I guess as we discuss, maybe the leaders of Congo are listening. They should be figuring out what they need to do, and Also, maybe let people know where they can help to resolve that problem. Because Congo's problems are not just Congo's problems. They affect us as well, as neighbors. Congo has 9 neighbors. Each one of us is affected by what happens in the Congo. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Some more than others, but everybody is affected. Right. So that's why, naturally, neighbors have legitimacy to do something or say something about it. And if we can figure out as neighbors how to help the transition in Congo to happen without affecting us or affecting them so badly, then that's what we should be looking at.
I think we have one of the major opponents of Kabila here was supposed to be main supporter, main candidate for, where is Katumbi? Oh, okay. You are not allowed to go back to the country, correct? Okay, and do you have anything to add what the president said? I mean, is there any hope for a reasonable election in your country?
I think I don't have anything to add at the moment. I think the president has said everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, he's going to be a good politician, this guy, isn't he? Right. I can go on all night, really. There are so many issues to discuss, but I think we need to open it to people also who want to ask some questions. And I said, really, no statements, right? Question.
And any question.
Huh?
And any question.
And any question. He is willing to answer any question. Please, mics. Okay, we'll come to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nomashu Bingume from South Africa. I work as a consultant for the Department of Trade and Industry. And my question to His Excellency is, what is your succession plan for Rwanda? And if that succession plan includes changing the constitution and running for a 10th term, how are you going to ensure that you don't fall into the pitfalls of the predecessors that have stayed in power very long, who started off delivering for the people and then somehow forgot or that got lost in the...
Okay, question is clear. Okay, thank you.
Let me answer that first.
Are you sure you are from South Africa? Okay. You wanna...
Well, first of all, there is the good question of possibility of falling in the pit and we don't deliver as we have been. Well, let me say we have cases where people have not delivered at all and continue and not delivering or don't deliver and in the end go but leave nothing behind, and that is okay because they have left. That's fine. But but the succession plan is not mine. If it had been mine, in fact, I would not be here now. I would have left because that's what I intended to do. I intended to serve the 2 terms I was supposed to serve and leave. That had been my intention, and it's clear. I don't have to keep defending myself on it. For me, I'm deep in my heart.
Yeah.
Satisfied that's what it was. Until people asked me to stay. And even took some time before I accepted, but finally I accepted.
Absolutely.
And I accepted because of some history, the history of where my involvement in the business of politics or even being a leader started from. It started from, maybe it should not have been there. It started from the situation I was in, even from childhood. When I grew up, participated in the struggle, and we were just looking for a country, for rights as other people have, and that's how I got involved in the armed struggle. First I was in Uganda, then Rwanda, then I wasn't doing that to become president. I never even dreamt I would be president until it actually happened. In fact, even when there was opportunity to be president, I chose not to be. In '94, when whatever happened had happened, my party, which had taken it for granted that I was going therefore to take the helm and be the leader, I told them they needed to look for somebody else. I told them that I wasn't prepared for it. It's not even what all along I was fighting for. So that's how they chose another president. And at that time, I became vice president and Minister of Defense. So later on, the president who had been elected then selected to be there in my place, had problems with the parliament. They impeached him and removed him. Then they came back to me and said, this time you are not going to say no. I said, fine. That's how.
Being a vice president already had some training.
I had already found some bearing. Yes. So anyway, so many things happened after that until recently. So succession is going to come out of what is happening in my country, where we have come from, where we are, and up to a point, in fact, today it is as if I've been left to decide when I should go. And I want to assure the lady there that making that decision will not be very difficult. I won't have to, if people were to tell me to stay and I'm not convinced, for example, if I had reached a stage, if I were to reach a stage where, and I won't reach that stage, where people would tell me to continue, when I am one person who, let me not offend people, but I know when I still have some strength to do what they expect me to do. Yeah. And when it is at that point that I feel I can't do much for them, which they expect from me, I just tell them no. But I tell them even before they tell them to continue. And when it comes to that, even if they insist, I also insist on going. So that's how it will operate.
But one question here, now, Mr. President, and please, I'm not flattering you because I don't flatter people. Yeah, sure. But you really did a lot for this country, and people admire the delivery. What you have made out of this country. People admire that. Then you have been also a great African leader, paying attention to the African issues, whatever it is, whether international, corruption issues, justice issues, climate issues, whatever. You are one of few leaders who are really African leaders. We have some nationalist leaders here and there, but not many of them are Africans. Because I think if you're African, you need to pay attention to all of Africa to earn the name African leader. And, but that's going to create a problem because your brand became mixed with Rwanda brand. Would that make it very difficult for your successor to come and fill in your shoes now? You'll be seen now like a father of the nation. You know everybody in the world. You led the country. You managed this transformation. Would that not be a difficult transformation will you pass to successor?
Depending on how you look at it, first of all, everyone has their shoes.
Yeah. These guys, I will have the.
I didn't have to fill anybody's shoes. So I'm sure there are people out there who don't have to fill my shoes, who will do the service required for this country differently. They don't have to fill my shoes. They have to do what they need to do for the country, and starting from where the country is. I started from a different place.
Yeah.
So people starting from where the country is, I think are there. They will be found, and they will build on what exists and maybe continue the brand or take it in a different direction, but nonetheless a good brand.
Can I ask you another personal question? Okay, you get fed up of this, get tired.
Sure.
Especially working with the African Union is very tiring.
It is. I am a witness to that.
So what is Paul Kagame's future plans? I mean, you're going to take up golf, you're going to take up fishing. So if you come time and say, guys, okay, you take this. You're going to start a foundation? You're going to go to the global stage, do something there, or what? This is a personal question. What do you want to do in future?
I have many things to do. One, I will try and be supportive to the one who brings his shoes to him. I definitely want that person to succeed.
Okay, so you need
for my
you
country.
owe something for.
Yes,
for,
absolutely.
Yes.
There's no question I have to.
Right.
I owe that. I continue to give whatever little that will remaining in me to make sure we move forward. The second, I'm a very happy person, satisfied person. I have my family, which has always comforted me. I always fall back to it for when I have all these frustrations. And they give me the support required, and friends and so on. Maybe in the near future, who knows, the children, you later on have grandchildren. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And
so no golf for you, or no?
Golf, well, some of them may take me there.
Okay,
Yes.
Because you have wonderful greens here.
Yes,
you
but
have
third, I have always wanted time to myself. I want to almost go back to school, let me put it that way. I always want to.
You don't envisage a role in United Nations or international.
No.
You had enough.
Even if they bribed me, I wouldn't go for it.
You don't want just this one.
Not after this one. Not
after. Any question? More questions, please. Okay, madam. Question, please.
I know. I'm Joel Taylor, Vice President of Liberia. And I have one question. As Chair of the African Union, you now sit over a body that is 100% male. What are your plans for making sure the gender equity rules and programs you set here are now over the continent? Because we feel a little bit left out. What are you going to do as Chair of the AU?
Well, there is only so much I can do, but one has to. It's a good thing that at least I can say we have started from home. We try to do some of the things that relate to what you have just said here at home. And secondly, we can keep talking to one another across our continent to really encourage, to show that there is a need. I mean, I think people understand the need only when it comes to doing it. Some difficulty develops, which I don't understand, but we can work together, sharing experiences, showing the need for things to change across, to give women their place they deserve, and it's not really to give it to them. It's not like we are handing anything to them or doing a favor to them. It's just realizing that it is important for all of us, not just for women, but for men as well. So this helps the understanding, but the practice as we have it here in our country can help us to make any input required to that conversation, and that's where, and even raising the discussion at the level of the African Union and putting it high on the agenda is very critical, so that we don't have one vice president across the continent. We had one president, the former president of Liberia, Johnson Sirleaf, who still had one. We need 2, 3, 4, maybe. So we need to do what needs to be done. I can only promise to put an effort in it, but we can't change things.
It was mentioned to me that this is the African Union declared this as a year of fighting corruption. Is that true?
Yes.
Somebody said this year of corruption. So what concrete steps, not slogans, but what the African Union going to do to say we are going to fight corruption? Are they going to agree something concrete? They're going to participate there's a number of conventions, a number of things around. They're going to say, let's sign this stuff? Or
I have started thinking that even slogans are useful. At least they remind people. Yes, so to begin with, slogans, okay. But immediately, and more importantly, we need to go beyond that, which you are saying. So we have at least identified it as one of the things we have to deal with. It has been put out there. We even appointed a head of state of a very important country, Nigeria, to champion that.
Yeah, Buhari.
And yes, President Buhari. And he came up with different proposals of what needs to be done at a national level as well as continental level. You see, I had people discuss that topic when we came in the panel. I think it was a very brilliant discussion. They raised very important points. First, to ask the question whether corruption is African is not to excuse corruption, but it is to put the record straight. And straight in the two senses. One, for sure, corruption is a very serious problem in Africa. But it doesn't help to deal with it by calling it African. So corruption doesn't matter. In fact, most of these corruption cases in Africa, the major ones that we know across the continent are shared between Africans and the others from outside. There's no doubt about it.
Mr. President, in our foundation, and we speak a lot in Europe with America, and we engage with all those people, on the issue of corruption, we argue that for every single corrupt African leader or African official, there is a dozen corrupt business people sitting in the room, honored, in Europe, United, and we say, who's going to dealing with this guy? Those are partners in crime.
Yes.
And there's no light shed on those guys. And we say we cannot deal with governance in the public sector without dealing with governance in the private sector also.
That's correct.
You need to enforce also rules there.
Absolutely correct.
We challenge Europeans, and people need to know that corruption has been legal in Europe until the year 2000. Are you aware of that? It's been actually tax deductible. Tax deductible. You call it business expenses. Okay? And that's my CFO. I'm a businessman, you guys, you know that. You know, it's called, that's my CFO advice to me. It said, you know, if you want to pay any money, Mr. Ibrahim, it was French actually. Maybe that explains it. Anyway. And he said, you know, it's business expenses, legal, tax deductible. Under pressure from OECD, they made it illegal. Became crime. And we challenge Europeans, we say, how many people in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, in Germany, in Greece, in Italy, have been tried for corruption in Africa? None. I remember once we were having a meeting with the Chancellor of Germany, Madame Merkel, and I was complaining about corruption and said, look, what we're doing with Siemens at that time. I said, actually, Siemens has been tried for when they tried to destroy the fabric of the German society, because when they use the trade union and, you know, the director of the board from trade union, it was what is happening in Germany. Siemens was never tried for what is committed in Nigeria and other places, which all people know.
Yeah, many cases.
Exactly. So nobody has been tried for any corruption in Africa. And we ask the question, does it mean there's no corruption in Africa? So what are you talking about? Or there is corruption, but we will not try our business people even when it is illegal.
Sure.
So there is a lot of hypocrisy here, and people need to confront that. Yeah. And that is really important to confront it.
That's right. But on top of that, again, as I said, we can't sound like we are excusing anything here. So on our side, we need to do what we need to do. We also can't keep allowing our countries, even giving services to our own people. It was again said here very eloquently. I mean, the service that should be free, everybody expects that.
Yes.
Yes, and even at the airports, whether it is immigration, it is a policeman, and a traffic policeman, or handling another case, or even in our own ministries, people to do what they were appointed to do, what they were put there to do. They want to do it only if this is a relative or this is money paid by somebody. It should be completely unacceptable, and there are ways to do it. One way is to insist on accountability.
Yes.
And when you go for accountability, don't go for these small, you know, you start punishing drivers and clerks and and then the big guys.
Yeah, you steal chicken, you go to prison, you chop off your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah, you steal the whole country.
Why don't you go for the big guys? You need to. Yes, you need.
No, this but I mean, people also think there is also low-hanging fruits, easy to do. We have been campaigning all over the world about the issue of trustee companies and you know, ownership, beneficial ownership, because a class of companies which you don't know who owns it.
Yeah.
And that is the vehicle for corruption, because you said you steal money, where you put it? You put it in, and some countries started to decriminalize, you know, criminalize that or to ban it.
Yes.
And that can be a simple suggestion for the African countries.
Yes.
Why don't you, if you want to find corruption, why don't you abolish trustee companies if you have any class? Because then there's no place to hide.
It starts at a national level. There are certain things expected that were spelled out in what President Buhari presented that we need to look at as even nation states, what we need to be doing to fight corruption. But then there is also what operates at a continental level, and these are some of the things that should be coming up. It's not something that fixes corruption overnight, or it will be improved, it will need to be talked about, people will have to be mobilized, and as you said, the civil society gets involved in that, the media gets involved in that, but then national governments have responsibility to ensure that actually this functions.
Right. And also, I think rule of law is also important.
Yes.
We had a discussion before about Tanzania, and there was concern about the strange behavior of the government of Tanzania. And we said really need to be frank about all these issues. We salute, of course, the strong feeling of the president of Tanzania about corruption. We think that's wonderful. But in execution, that should happen through a process.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a single man act above
That's
the
a
law,
fair
because
point.
that gives a bad name for fighting corruption.
That's a
It
fair
becomes
point.
like,
Absolutely.
institutions. We need to build the institutions, rule of law, and I think that is really quite important. We have Salim here. I hope he pass this message to his president, and we hope to see you back again. Look, the president has been, because he gave me 30 minutes, it's already 1 hour now.
No problem.
And I don't want to abuse really his hospitality. Can I take one or two
Sure,
questions?
sure, no problem.
Question, please. Who's that, sorry? Okay, go ahead.
Hamdi Osman. Mr. President, most of the leaders in our century now that we see have done what you have done in the last 17 years, something to be very proud of, is what I'd like to know today, Rwandan who just got married and have a child, 30 years from now, what Rwanda is going to look like in your eyes? I want you to look into the future and look backwards rather than standing in future and look forward. So I want you to look back to the future and just tell me what it's going to look like. And for Mr. Mo, I think I recommend just...
I'm not taking questions, okay?
No. Recommendation for you.
I'm only asking questions.
Only recommendation for you to build more Ritz-Carlton in Africa so that way we can be able to catch them.
That's too expensive. Yeah.
Well, just looking at where we have been 24 years ago and where we are now, maybe in another 30 years, if we can be 5 to 10 times better than where we are now.
Switzerland of Africa?
No, Rwanda of Africa.
You look like it, actually. You have the mountains, you have the lakes.
Yes,
yeah.
the Rwanda that
Little bit
is
of clinics.
yes, developed, stable, where the citizens feel proud of being Rwandans and part of and contributing to the well-being of the rest of the world is what I want to see. Yes, there's somebody.
You choose which one you want.
Let's have the lady there, maybe. And then there's a gentleman in green. Okay. If we do quickly.
Those two people, and that's it. Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for picking me. My name is Omonigo. Okay, my name is Omonigo Yoma Brown from Nigeria. So my question to you is, you made mention about the fact that when we're getting funding for the AU from external donors, there's so much we can do with regards to pushing the interest of Africans, right? So, and you also mentioned about getting the African nations to fund the AU. You talked about 0.02%. So I wanted to ask is this funding going to be equal across all African countries? And if it's not going to be equal, would there still be that risk of a country contributing more, getting its interests represented more than other countries that can contribute more?
Yes, we go step by step. I think we cannot eliminate completely one country having an influence over the other, even if they were not paying for them. They can still do that. That will happen. That's not what we are talking about. What we are talking about is making sure that as a continent, when we can contribute for us on activities of the African Union, we should do that so that out of the continent, there is not this kind of funding that will help us do what we want to do, but get beholden or tied to these interests of outsiders who are paying for us. There is not even a need for people to pay for us anyway. There is no basis. There is no good reason. I have been telling my people here, when we are trying sometimes to be provocative so that they really work hard and see things, we keep asking ourselves why the rest of the world keep giving us aid. Aid is good, and I have been misunderstood to have meant something else, but that's not what I meant. What I meant was, first of all, as a proud people, Rwandans or Africans, why should citizens of other countries keep footing your bills for everything?
Yeah.
Why? Why don't you want to be like them?
Exactly.
So
That's
yes. So if we can use that aid to put ourselves firmly on our feet,
and we need to, yes,
as quickly as we can, then that is the best way.
I think that.
So the 0.2% will not put us at the same amount for every country, but it will put us proportionate to be proportionate to the size of the country.
The
indeed.
GDP
So some will pay more than others,
Yeah.
but more or less what you are paying is equal to your standing on the continent in terms of your capacity to pay. That's the fairness of it. But to make sure that you are paying and you know it has come from you, maybe it reduces the influence even on the one who is paying more, because he's paying more for more people. You're paying less
but
for less.
historically, there was 5 countries paying probably 75% of the budget.
Right.
Already is there, because bigger countries contribute more. It's normal.
It's normal. It's very normal. So we are
Right.
not the same size anyway, but that doesn't mean you have to always fall under the influence of everyone who is bigger than you.
You selected the gentleman at the back.
Yes,
Do some gentleman at the back selected? Please, your
Thank
name?
you. I am called Tanda. I'm a Cameroonian, and I work with the International Crisis Group. Thank you very much for selecting me. My question is because as an African, I'm really worried about the African Union and African integration. So as chairman of the African Union, considering that some months ago, the Peace and Security Council voted to send some armed men into Burundi to prevent escalation into a civil war. But heads of states came in and annulled it. Don't you think that there is too much power vested on heads of state, and there is a need for some organs like the Peace and Security Council to be empowered? In that way, they can be more neutral compared to the heads of states that we have in Africa. If you don't think so, I would like to know why. If you think so, I would like to know if you plan to do something as chairman of the African Union. If yes, how? Thank you.
Well,
This is 5 questions.
I think there is always going to be too much to handle, to deal with, things that conflict. But we have to choose carefully how we proceed, because some of these things are going to be there anyway, naturally. Even if you say the Peace and Security Council does this, Peace and Security Council is drawn from among Africans, from African countries. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail, but you will find that anyway, even those you use from our continent have links with their countries, and therefore they'll even be influenced by the policies of their countries or their leaders, and so on and so forth. So it's not like you have a Peace and Security Council like a machine that has no connection with this influence we are talking about. But the most important thing is these institutions provide forums where people exchange views, and we have guidelines, we have things that operate to the extent that there is an outcome that is intended to address whatever problem that is there, even if it may not happen the way we would want it, or at least all of us would want it, or to address the problem. For example, when that problem we talked about of Burundi came up, of course, everybody knew there was a problem to be dealt with, except maybe Burundi, which was saying it has no problem. But therefore, different opinions for different reasons will come up as to how people think these challenges should be addressed. Some may act for sending their troops, others would say, no, let's wait, let's allow the region to, massage the problem and find a way of addressing it with minimum cost, sometimes in terms of minimum cost may involve trying to in a sense, I don't know whether you should use that, appease the powers that be that are actually behind some of the problems. It's like, again, the sovereignty issues come in, then, and when one head of state is talking about sovereignty of another country, he's thinking about his own sovereignty, about himself, and so these are things that come into play that you just can't cut through so easily like you would do, or like everyone would wish. So there are all these considerations, but that's the way the world operates.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I hope you join me for thanking Mr. President for a very candid